So hopefully that works. The oh, I'm just gonna okay. So one of the things that I wanted to share was that WHEELED is a growing group of women in the diabetes, nutrition, obesity space, and we've been trying to support each other with different sessions like this on a variety of topics, including mental health, divorce, and after conversations with several individuals, I thought having some content about the sandwich generation would be of value as well. For our information, you can go to our website, or if you are not familiar or you want to share this with anyone else, I'm going to put our wheeled link here, which is the Women Inspiring and Elevating Leadership in Diabetes. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to my co-facilitator for today, Sapna Bhambhani, to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Durga. And thanks everyone for being here today. We will be discussing the sandwich generation, balancing children, career, and caregiving. And this is an important topic for many of us in the workforce, with children who require our attention and aging parents needing care. We know caregiving is a reality that millions of employees navigate every day and often quietly and without much support. And the pressure with this can be overwhelming. And so today's discussion is going to explore some actionable strategies that we can use. We will learn a little about what the research shows and discuss how organizations can support employees who are balancing dual caregiving roles. So at this time, I'm honored to introduce our panelists. Panelists, I will invite each of you to introduce yourself and your role, and I will start, and your as well as your story, and as it relates to this topic. And I will go ahead and start with Zarina Bhambhani.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Zarina Bhambhani. I run the private company practice across 6 offices at KPMG Canada across the Prairie Provinces, based in Edmonton, Alberta. You may have heard of it if you have hockey fans in your life. I have two little ones, so I have two kids under 2.5, so our life is busy. My husband runs his own real estate development company. I've got two parents that also live in the same city. They're both in their late 70s. They still live on their own, but like most of us with aging parents, they deal with ongoing health challenges, and you can see them sort of wearing down. And so relating a lot to the juggling act that is caring for all of them.
Thanks, Zarina. Next, Danielle Dean.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Danielle Dean. I'm an assistant professor of medicine in the Division of Diabetes and Endocrinology and Metabolism at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I am a mom, and I have a small child. I have a little girl who's 5, and I live in Nashville, and I'm lucky that I have some family who are close. My parents lived not too far from here, and my mother is still living close by. But like others, I have had some challenges with managing both childcare and uh, aging parents. And so I'm happy to talk about that today.
Thank you. We'll go to Ester Friedman.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm a research associate professor at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan. I'm also an associate director of the panel study of income dynamics. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but it's a data set that collects family data, including information on caregiving and intergenerational care. My background is as a sort of sociologist and a family demographer, so I've always been interested in families. And in recent years, so much of my work has ended up focusing on families and caregiving and kind of the intersection between, family care and paid care and how policies are kind of fostering different care arrangements. And I think I was sort of invited here as a researcher on this topic. So I do have work that specifically focuses on sandwich generation caregivers and also on dementia caregivers, which I'll put out there as well, because I think that's becoming a more common type of care that needs to be provided either solely or along with care for children. And I guess I think of both of these groups as sort of caregivers but more so, these are the caregivers that have to provide, kind of more help. They need more care coordination. There's also kind of, a more greater, risk of adverse outcomes for caregivers from this type of care. And as we kind of increase awareness of caregiving, we also need to think about differences and how some groups may be struggling more than others because of these dual responsibilities, either within the caregiving sector or across, work and care and family and care. I guess I just also on a personal note, I think like a lot of people here, I've experienced personal experience with caregiving as well. I was a pretty involved caregiver to my grandfather with dementia. I thought I was helping my grandfather, but really I think I was helping my grandmother, who was the primary caregiver, by giving her company and helping her out when I kind of, would go to help my grandfather. She was really the one who needed just, I don't know, just contact with people and help just with different things around the house. So I think I learned a lot from that experience earlier on. And my parents are older and I have young children. Luckily, my parents are healthy and independent now, but my mother was sick several years ago. And one of the things that I and my family had to figure out was really how to kind of coordinate care for her. So I have several sisters, some live closer, I live a little further, trying to figure out how to coordinate across distances. And all of us have different family and work obligations. I think that's a really big part of this as well, and without hurting relationships, right? Figuring out how to do this where everybody feels like they're doing what's right for them and that they're getting the support that they need.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. And then last but not least, Kristy Townsend.
Hi. So I'm a professor at Ohio State University in neurological surgery, but I'm a neuroscientist and I'm also an associate dean for research. My story is I have three kids. I have a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old. My 9-year-old was a 29-week preemie and got hydrocephalus, and just in February had his 10th neurosurgery. So three kids, but one of them special needs and everything that comes with that. And then for my parents, my mom, we found out about 5 years ago, has a genetic ataxia. And about a year ago, broke her hip in a way that can never be unbroken, I've learned. I've been shocked that that's how it works, but she's in a wheelchair. And now also the neuropathy and dementia and stuff coming with her neurological condition and supporting my dad, who's taking care of her. So yeah, that's me. But I just want to add too, I think this is all this sandwich generation stuff tends to happen when we're perimenopausal, menopausal, and maybe trying to take on leadership roles. So I think this is a really unique time for all of us in our careers. And so thank you for Wield hosting this session.
Yeah, and thank you for those introductions. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about kind of your strategies. And that was actually one of our goals, is to kind of think about the actionable strategies that people can take away from hearing your stories and what's, worked for you. And I know different things work for different people, but you're all very successful. And I'm curious what strategies you've used to stay focused and productive when, juggling multiple, different burdens outside of work and inside of work. And then even, I guess trying to figure out how how you've been able to thrive through that. I don't know who would like to answer first, or we could go in the same order.
Sure, I can kick it off. I don't know that I have anything sort of earth-shattering, but for me, I know I had an epiphany where I learned the difference between compartmentalizing versus multitasking. And I think lots of times as, professional women especially, we sort of would take pride in feeling like we could do 10 things at once. One time my team sort of photoshopped this picture and it was my head with, 5 arms coming out of it because that's what they saw me as someone who would just multitask. And I very quickly learned that what you actually have to do anything well is compartmentalize and just constantly reprioritize and be putting out the hottest fire and be okay with that constant state of flux. And so for me, that's really the only way that I juggle all of the things going on and then know when I've reached my limit and when I need to lean on my spouse or my family and actually be okay with leaning on those people, which I think is something else that as women and mothers, we try to sort of be the martyr that does it all. And I think being okay with leaning on people is another strategy that I use just to make it through the day.
I like that, Zarina. That resonates a lot with me because I do think my grandfather used to say a change is as good as a rest. And I think for some people, changing between different things that might distract you from things that are stressful maybe doesn't work for everybody, but luckily for me, that is how I do it as well. But the other thing is, I think we can't be hard on ourselves when we fully have to unplug, fully step back. Maybe we need a day in bed, not doing any work or attending to caretaking duties. And I think we can sometimes feel guilty because we're so used to multitasking and have wearing a lot of hats, but I think that's an important part of it to recharge.
Yeah, I think I've learned from this that I have to ask for help. And that's really hard because I think I am one of those people who feels like I have to do everything. And I think a lot of us feel like we have to champion everything all at once and really be, the strong leader. And I think sometimes what I've learned is that I have to ask for help. And I feel very lucky that I have a very supportive environment around me. I have siblings and a very supportive husband. And I think that if I hadn't really fallen on those things when I've gone through particularly challenging times in life, that I really just wouldn't be able to get through things. Um, Rest is really one that I'm still working on. So I'm here to learn some strategies as well.
I guess I'll just add, I mean, I agree with all of this. And I feel like for me, it's really important for me to like protect my time and to block time. Like I use my calendar as a way to kind of organize tasks and save time for different things I need to do. It's both so I remember that I have things to do, but also that I can kind of protect a few hours a day to take care of something that I need to take care of. And it could be personal, or it could be, writing that doesn't always get done. But I find that I need to, very explicitly, save the time and think about it at the beginning of the week too, like kind of how my week's going to go.
Great. So thank you for those. I think those strategies have resonated with many of us that are also trying to juggle multiple responsibilities as well and addressing caregiving. But what I'd like to ask next, and this question is focused on the research. So it's for Esther. What has the research demonstrated as major issues for individuals in this sandwich generation, and what are some tactics to address this?
Yeah, so I mean, we only have an hour in total, so I don't know if I can get through all the issues. There was a really nice National Academies report that was led by like Rich Schultz and some others that kind of laid out a lot of the issues, and it really touches on, I think, most domains of life. So, it spills into, work, both, work-life conflict and kind of employment. So, we're already talking about that, but balancing caregiving with career is very challenging. A lot of caregivers are putting in as many hours as another full-time job, an hour of like, 30 hours a week. That's kind of an average. So, it's another job that's going on, and trying to figure out how to balance that with your other job is challenging. There's research on how it affects work, and people aren't necessarily leaving jobs, so you don't see the effects right away, but some work that's looked over the longer term, like over 20 years, and looked at people who are caregiving earlier on and maybe aren't now, but you can see longer term effects on kind of trajectories of income. And so somehow their earnings and their income isn't keeping up with somebody who didn't have these same obligations. And this work is specifically on care for like older parents. And we already know there's a lot of work on childcare, but even for parent care, that people are kind of taking a hit, and maybe they're not getting promotions. Maybe it's something else, but we're seeing this in the sort of longer terms. There's financial stress in the short and the long term, not only this employment piece, but for some people, paying. You can't always take care of everybody physically. You have to might pay for help or pay for other expenses. Caregivers are spending, I think there's some data like $10,000 a year. There's a significant amount of money that's being spent on caregiving. And, so for some people, that's better. Maybe that's kind of more feasible than putting in the time. But for other people, they're doing both, and you still have to pay a significant amount. Relationship quality, spousal quality, other relationships are affected, burnout, social isolation. Well, any well-being measure, there's literature on that. And then physical health, right? Caregivers often we're talking about not having enough time to kind of do your work and take care of your kids. The thing that is going to go is, doctor's appointments or sleep or other things that we know have important aspects for physical health. So yeah, there's more, but that's basically it's everything. I mean, there really are implications for all aspects of life. And I mean, there have been some pretty proposals for pretty big changes. I think big changes need to happen in the workplace, through Medicare, Medicaid, the policy level, and then. But I guess solutions in this sort of shorter term things you can do yourself are really thinking about your network and who can help. Not doing all of this alone, finding ways to delegate tasks, take breaks. I do some work on caregiver social networks, and it has huge consequences for health and well-being. Just having people and the right people in your network and people who are assisting, right? You can have a lot of people in your life, but they're not necessarily helping you, or the relationships could be, negative relationships. And family is sometimes great. Family is not always great. It could be friends. So I mean, really thinking about who you have in your support network and how they can help you, I think is really important. I don't know, I could say more, but I think that's probably that's a lot. I can give numbers too, more data, but it's basically there's been work on all these aspects. So we know there are a lot of consequences, and it's kind of a really big issue. Solving it is the harder part.
I'm just curious as a follow-up question, Esther, and maybe to our
Mhm.
other panelists, like you mentioned how social networks are a key piece to this. A lot of you mentioned family members that are your social networks. Some people don't have family nearby them. How have you managed that, or has anyone had like any surprising social networks that have turned out to help them?
Yeah, so I will say that from my perspective, so a little more background about me is I have aging parents in their late 70s. My father passed away about a year and a half ago. He had severe diabetes, cardiovascular disease, dementia in the beginnings of it, anyways. And one of the people actually that really ended up helping us a lot was our neighbor. So their next door neighbor for a long time, who happened to be my brother's best friend growing up, and he still lived in his family home. They really just embraced them and loved them, and kept communicating with me when um, uh, maybe something wasn't quite right, and so I could always count on them because I wasn't living in the same city as my parents, and so that was a big challenge. I was close by, but not in the same place. And so I think that if they are living alone, I think having somebody who's there to check in on them and just keep an eye on them and having a good communication relationship with that person is really invaluable. So I feel very grateful to this individual who I've known all my life. I mean, most of my life, but so close to family, but not family.
I'd like to pose the next question to Zarina, specifically with regards to turning caregiving challenges into leadership strengths, because I know this is something that you have been dealing with a lot lately. How have your caregiving challenges shaped your leadership style or decision-making approach? I know you spoke a lot about leaning on family or going from juggling to compartmentalizing, but is there anything else you would want to shape about your leadership style or share about your leadership style or decision-making approach now?
Yeah, I think, what I would have always characterized myself, hopefully as someone who was a bit of an authentic leader, but I think I've really leaned a lot more into this. Like in the last, 2.5 years, I've had two kids. I really haven't taken any maternity leave. I've sort of got this big job. I travel a lot for work. And so I think, trying to keep this artificial separation between work and life actually became completely impossible. And so leaning into giving people some transparency in terms of what I'm dealing with, how I'm juggling things, what's important to me, I think has really resonated with my team, especially with younger parents, younger women that are sort of going through those same challenges around, what do I want to do with my life? Can I really pursue a career and juggle all of my other goals? And I've gotten a lot of good feedback that way about, being very open about the realities and sometimes the sacrifices or the trade-offs that we all go through. And I think that actually helps do our teams a favor instead of trying to make it look very easy and having this facade. I think you actually end up losing people along the way because they go, you know what, this is really just too hard for me. And I'm actually very open about how hard it is and the sacrifices that I make and that those may not be for everyone. They may not be for everyone at a particular point in time in their career because we're all picking and choosing, what we want to focus on and when. So yeah, I would say, the authenticity piece, and I would say it's made me hyper conscious about just the inclusivity, things as simple as picking what time you schedule a meeting. If I'm much more conscious that if people have to do drop-offs for their kids in the morning, maybe 8 o'clock isn't the best time for them to have a meeting. We can meet at 9, maybe they want to leave and pick up their kids from school. And I think I'm just that much more vigilant about being a bit inclusive because you don't know what people are dealing with. And sometimes it takes dealing with it yourself, to be that much more conscious of it.
I wonder before we kind of transition to, our audience having some questions. So please do think about what your questions might be. If you can't say them, you can always type them in the chat. But I wondered, I know Danielle and Kristy, you also have, kind of research programs that you're leading. Kristy, you were, leading the WIMS group at OSU. Has this come up for you as well? Like how kind of transparent to be about caregiving challenges and like how to approach that, like normalizing it, I guess.
Yes, so I agree. I've been as transparent as I can be with my lab and with other folks that I work with, because I think sometimes I'm going to have a day where I'm distracted, where something's happening with a family member, and my head might not be fully there. So I think explaining that is really important. And I think on the flip side, the people I work with know if they're having a day or something like that's happening, they know they can say something, and I'll be understanding and help accommodate. We can't always be fully present every single day. So I think we all have to support each other and share that we have these challenges and these lives outside of work that impact our ability to be present some days.
Yeah, I would say the same for me and how I interact with the group that I lead. I feel like I've had to be very honest with them about certain things, like, just and say, this is how life is, and you're gonna have challenges. There's gonna be day-to-day challenges, and then there's gonna be these periods of time, like especially if you're experiencing grief, especially I think that's a really hard one for people because unless you've actually gone through grief, you don't really fully understand. And you can grieve a lot of things. You can grieve the death of someone, but you can also grieve the changes in life that happen to you. And I think that sometimes we have to remember that that's not a very linear path or even a short path. And so I have to give people some grace, and I hope that they return it to me for in the situations where I've needed some um extra time to process things as well.
And I'll add, we never quite implemented this in WIMS, and now, of course, we can't say the word women with anything. But one of the ideas that we had floated is sort of these interest groups where people might, like I'm parenting multiple kids, or I'm have elder care challenges, or I've got a special needs child. And so we hadn't ever fully formally built that, but I do have colleagues who I know also have special needs kids that we will go get a cocktail now and then. And there's just a level of understanding that's comforting because we're sharing a similar professional life, but we can also talk about all the stuff we're balancing as well.
The University of Michigan, I think, has like a caregiver support group. I mean, I don't know, others might know, more about that, but I see it advertised every once in a while, and I think that's great to have it kind of more institutionalized, and you can find people easily if you need it.
I want to make sure that anyone who's on who would like to ask a question has the opportunity. Anyone from our attendees have a question for our panel?
I have a question. I'm wondering, sorry, my camera's off. I'm wondering if anyone has experienced having a leader who's not amenable to, like I heard someone say they try to be transparent and explain what's going on. And I think that works in like the group that you manage, right? But maybe the who you report to is less interested in that personal information. I'm wondering how you've navigated that.
Yeah, that this answer might not be what I should, the walk I should be walking, but yeah, I'm very transparent down, but not up. So, because I think there is bias in the workplace and it's hard to overcome that. So I'm very transparent with the people I'm sort of working with or that work for me, but not my bosses probably have no idea.
I'd have
Yeah,
to
I
say
would
the same for the
unfortunately
most part.
agree with that. Sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
No, sorry. I was just saying, yeah, I unfortunately think that's the case for a lot of us, is that we try to mirror or project for the people that we're trying to bring up a little bit different image than the people that we're trying to, maybe impress. And that's probably a bad thing. I will say I've had some pretty very, very kind leaders in my career who I have been able to be very transparent with, and they've been very supportive with various things throughout my career, things that happened in my postdoc and things that happened in my faculty career. I've been very lucky, but
Yeah, I would say the same thing for people whom I've had a long history of working with, and there was a lot of trust there. I think then, when I moved into a phase a few years ago where I had my kids, I found them being the most supportive because I think they knew that they could trust me. And I think that when you're a bit of an unknown, it's to Kristy's point, not fair, but I think you do have to sort of be a little bit more strategic with who you share what. But I also think that as we start to get more diversity in leadership teams. Now I run a team that's about 800 or 900 people, and I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to sort of shift that culture. I do think it helps. I think not only with more women in leadership roles, but I think just with younger people in leadership roles. I actually think that working with a man in his late 40s or 50s is a little bit different than working with someone, 10 or 15 years more senior, just in terms of their expectations and understanding of what goes on at home. And again, I'm painting with a broad brush there, but I have noticed that, we say diversity and oftentimes we just assume that that means more women in leadership roles. But I actually just think diversity overall in leadership slowly can help to kind of make those conversations a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, I have to say, like, it's hard sometimes, probably both ways, as you said, Serena, like when you're managing so many people or so many people are kind of reporting through you and your structure, if you don't hear it, you won't necessarily know what people need, right? But at the same time, they may be apprehensive to come talk to you about it if they're struggling. Maybe it's sandwich generation, maybe it's something else. One of the things that we've used is we've looked at data. I'm just going to mention this just kind of from my work as in faculty affairs. And Esther kind of alluded to this with kind of what happens with the workforce data. And people aren't leaving necessarily their job, but like we see women retire earlier. And I'm kind of always very curious about this data, right? As one piece to like why do they leave earlier in their work for where their jobs? Is it because of some of these issues? I don't know. Has anyone noticed that trend in their spaces as well?
I mean, I notice more women leaving academic science, and I think especially now we're at risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how that translates out of academia, but I just happen to be something I've noticed. I mean, that transitions me to one of the questions that I want to make sure we have a good amount of time to discuss, which is, how can we as organization, like we all work in different organizations, like what can we do to set up real supports? Some of you have touched on this, but um, from each of you, I really would like to hear like what you think are most impactful ways organizations can support caregivers, and even those that are returning from a caregiving period of time.
I'm happy to popcorn at the start here. So I don't know how this would be built. I don't know if we have the infrastructure in academia to build something like this, but I think for people running complex research teams or clinical and research or clinical and teaching, there's no one that can fill in for us, right? So if we're have a sick day or a sick day because we're caretaking or, we're on maternity leave, which we really can't take, like Serena said, who's filling in for us? And I feel like if we had a structure where we could have people drop in to be a lab manager for a day, or people could drop in and oversee, making sure a lab's staying compliant while someone's on an extended leave for, grief purposes or whatever it is. There's no replacement. There's no one who can fill in for us. And so then we can't really take any time off. And I think that's one of the biggest risks.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I'm in a slightly different type of work because it's more social science, data work, and I have a staff as well who help to collect data. And I think for us, I think having kind of flexible work arrangements, it's true, no one can fill in for the more senior folks, but being able to work from home, we have people who work some unconventional hours. I myself often, I have a complicated schedule, but I'm often remote, working remotely and going back and forth. And I think having that kind of flexibility has been really important for being able to juggle all the things that need to be juggled. It's not easy. I think it has its own challenges. When you work from home, what's kind of how do you divide your work life from your home life? That's a different struggle. But I think it does allow people to do other things that they need to do.
Yeah, I think maybe, I'll bring kind of the large corporate perspective. It's definitely something we're hugely focused on. I'll just speak for my organization. We've asked everyone to be in person 4 days a week, but recognizing that we still want people to feel like they have an element of flexibility. So, you have a day to work from wherever makes sense, but I think I mentioned it before, even having understanding around in person doesn't always mean that you're sitting in the office at 8 a.m. and you're there till 5 p.m. Let's be strategic and maximize the purpose of this mandate, which is to actually just engage in good interactions with people, not to make everyone's life difficult. And so if that means flexibility at the beginning and end of the day, that's great. Let's lean into the fact that we can work remotely. I know for me, I usually, after I put my kids to bed, I'm on the laptop for a couple hours catching up on things. That's actually when I get some good alone time and get some work done. And so I think you can actually really benefit from all the luxuries we have in the virtual world, still feeling like we're meeting our obligations to people. And then I'd say, very focused on, we call them our people networks, but we do have people networks for, caregivers, different ethnicity groups, all sorts of different people. We're an organization that's 11,000 people nationally. We have the benefit of being able to link people together with commonalities and give them that support. And I'd say the last piece of it is really financial, making sure that our benefits packages have the right supports, whether it's for caregiving expenses, for mental health expenses, for childcare expenses, or paid time off beyond just your sort of traditional PTO. And I'd say it's sort of that three-pronged approach that we've used to really make our workplace feel accessible to those people.
I'm curious also from our attendees if, I mean, you mentioned like policy or like, thinking about the hours arena. Like, are those concrete policies, or I'm curious if other people have seen policies that have worked like officially from an institution to kind of support this.
Ours is pretty unwritten. I'd say in a 11,000 person organization, we actually go out of our way to not have too many things that are set in stone across, an entire country. So I'd say, we have a guiding principle of 4 days in person. We like to keep the flexibility, to each individual team and manager, so that people can feel like they can work where it's most efficient. I do have a client where I actually really do like this policy of theirs, is they've said, okay, we recognize that everybody has obligations. We think everyone should agree that we can be in the office from 9:30 to 3:30. And that way they feel like they have the certainty where if you need to get a hold of each other and schedule meetings, we're all sort of crossing over at general business hours, but then everybody has flexibility at the bookends of the day. And I actually really like that policy. And I know when I try to book meetings with my teams, I almost try to constrain it to those hours just to be mindful that if someone has something to do, I don't want them to feel like, a meeting with me is standing between them and something that's really important.
think that's really important because, for a lot of us with young children, we have pickup and drop off hours for daycare or, there's no bus, for my kid to get picked up and taken to school. Right. And so I think for some of us, we need that flexibility, especially in those hours where the children may need some attention from school. And that seems like that's a fairly universal thing for a lot of caregivers of children, especially. I like that strategy.
Anyone else have any kind of policies, or I like that term of the guiding principles, um, that have worked to support the caregiving? If not, I'll turn it back over to Sapna.
Great, thanks, Durga. We did get a submitted question in advance. And this question was, how do we get men to be invested in this conversation as well? We talk a lot about caregiving falls mainly to women, but how do we incorporate men into this conversation? I'll open it up to the panel.
I mean, speaking to the research, men are doing some caregiving, especially for, older parents. Like they're doing different tasks than women do. A lot of times it's like helping mow the lawn or yard work or errands, not necessarily personal care. And they're definitely doing fewer hours. I think there's still evidence that there's a big gap in how much care is being done by men versus women, but men are doing things. And I think more and more we're going to see men taking on these roles. That doesn't mean that they're engaging in these conversations. They might not even identify as caregivers in the same way. And I think maybe that's something to think about as well. If you're doing it when you can do it, that's different than feeling responsible and managing the care. So, I have some work on like sisters and brothers in caregiving, and kind of there being a sister means that everyone's providing more care, even the brother. And sometimes it's not even the sister doing as much in families, but it kind of suggests that you need a woman there to make sure the care gets done. And I think we all know that there's kind of a management piece to all this that can take a big toll, even if it's not as quantifiable as like hours that people are doing.
Yeah, I think I got married in my late 30s. And so when I was sort of working and sort of pushing hard in my career for the sort of 15 years prior, I had really good advice from one of my mentors who told me like the most important decision you'll ever make is the person you marry. Because he says, you're going to have this big career and you're not going to slow down, but I know you want to do all these other things and you just have to be, honest with yourself about who the person is that can support you in doing that. And so I'm lucky that, my husband runs his own business, so he's got a ton of flexibility. He does 90% of the drop-offs and pickups, so that makes me very, very lucky. He will hand off getting up in the middle of the night when our baby doesn't want to sleep. And so, a lot of those things aren't things that I know some of my female counterparts can say about their spouse. And so I think that's part of it is realistic expectations. But I do agree with Esther that as good as he is, there's a project management to our life that he couldn't attempt to do. And he has no idea, what size diapers the kids wear, or if we need to, buy more formula. And so I think the nut we have to crack is how to get men out of the mindset of being the helpers and actually being the owners of some of this stuff. Because that's for sure what wears on me. But I do think the progress that we're seeing, and I'm glad the research backs it up, is that I think 10 or 15 years ago, it would be unheard of for, or very, very rare for someone to be doing the types of things that I would see my husband doing on a daily basis.
I'll jump onto that. I'm going to put a resource in the chat. So our Women in Medicine and Science group at Ohio State hosted a workshop with Kate Mangino, who wrote this book called Equal Partners. And it was open to everybody, but we did mostly have women showing up. And but I did think it helped people who were in, like a two-body, like two career household, that they were able to have more of the conversation of who's the default parent, who's the default dishwasher, who's the default whatever, because this workshop about equal partners helped give tools to have those conversations. Um, the other thing, and again, we can no longer do things like this at Ohio State, but at my prior institution, we had a very active advocates and allies group, male advocates and allies group. They would attend our women in medicine and science events. They would be part of discussions like this, and sort of when they signed up to be part of this, their agreement was that they would advocate. So in rooms and committees and P&T decisions, they would put their voices up for women who might have certain challenges held against them, like if they couldn't get to an 8 a.m. meeting, or they didn't have the productivity during a childbearing period of their life, etc. So I think advocates and allies are key, but I do worry we're losing some ground now, with some of those programs.
Yeah, it's all super insightful conversation. I really appreciate all of the panelists and your insights so far. So I want to ask a question that's maybe just a little bit more personal for any of our panelists who would like to, these have all been personal questions, but another question, who or what inspired you to keep going during a particularly tough phase in your career? A certain person, or maybe, an event or something, but is there someone you can point to that really inspired you and helped you at a really tough time?
I guess I can go. I mean, for me, I think I've experienced a couple different times in my career that were really tough. So during my postdoc, my husband passed away. And so I came very close to just, giving up my career. Um, but I thought about it and I was like, I think he would be very disappointed. And so I think for me, um, really to honor my late husband, sticking with my career was really important. And then, I think that also, you know, just just thinking about the people that I was mentoring to, as I thought I had a responsibility to model this behavior because I wanted to have this successful career. And so I think if I had really given up, then I think I would have really let a lot of people down. So I think that was the biggest inspiration for me to keep pursuing my career in diabetes research. So yeah. And then this guy too, my dad, who is the reason that I got into diabetes research in the first place. So.
Yeah, I guess for me, and that's honestly super inspirational, Danielle. I think for me, I have a job where I travel a lot. I'm away from home with two little kids. That obviously just gets hard sometimes, and the mom guilt that we all have is real, despite the good support system that you might have. There's days that you just feel like you wish you could be doing more. And so for me, I've really had to sit back lots of different times over the past few years and go, okay, I'm modeling for my kids how hard you have to work to get what we have in life. We're lucky to have a comfortable life and they have lots of things. And I do take solace in the fact that I want them to know how hard their mom worked for them to have those things. I do want them to have some of those attributes. And so for me, that's some of the gut checks that I have in terms of are the sacrifices that you're making worth it? Because on a day-to-day basis, when you're talking to them, hopefully over FaceTime for a few minutes, or you miss them altogether, you don't feel great about that. But like I said, I do hope that there's a bit of inspiration once they're old enough to understand.
Can I give a shout out to going on hormones? I think that is make it through challenging times, but also my kids, obviously, that they make it all worth it.
Thank you for sharing these incredibly personal experiences, and thank you for being here and helping us understand better this sandwich generation and all of the challenges and maybe opportunities for to help ourselves get through this. And I will turn it over to Durga to see if there's any more questions and then maybe close us out.
Yeah, I wonder, anyone think of anything else as we were going forward? Okay, there's one comment here. Always interested in learning more about other strategies, tools, and techniques for keeping it all organized together and staying organized. Esther mentioned using her calendar, but are there other tools that you are using to keep track of all the things you need to do? Okay, so a couple of things here. So Cozy is an app, Kristy, is that right?
Yeah, you can enter all your family members and it says what everybody's doing and who needs to be where, but it maintains a shared grocery list. I mean, it's helpful for a lot of family organizing.
Very cool.
And the same with the, yeah.
There's Todoist that I use, but actually maybe Cozy's even better. But it's, it lets you keep a to-do list. You could have kind of a visual representation of the things you're working on also, and you can sync it, across devices, which is nice. It's more for like it's not a family
Mm-hmm.
shared app, but it's more for me to keep track of things.
Well, that's helpful.
I like it. Yeah, I'm a list maker anyway, so.
Yeah, especially like when you're talking about juggling like multiple appointments and different things like you both have mentioned.
I have a colleague who has a really nice, easy strategy that like Monday mornings, she has a meeting, on her calendar every morning, and she and her husband from different locations, they kind of have a Zoom call and they kind of make their plan for the week so that they can coordinate, what, after school activities the kids have and other, work obligations. And I thought that was pretty cool. They treat it like a serious work meeting and, no one can schedule things during that time, and then they make their plans. So I thought that was an interesting technique. I think it works for them.
We have another question in here that I can read. I would like to know how you navigate through the guilt of saying no to family members who need, as you yourself are so burdened with other responsibilities, including work obligations and children, etc.
This is cliche, but I think it's that whole put your own oxygen mask on first, right? Like we can't help anybody else unless our tanks are full. So I think that's when I say no to anything.
Yeah, I think in finding a backup, like if I can't do it, and again, I'm lucky to lean on my husband, but my dad was in and out of the hospital probably a handful of times over the last couple of months, and like I couldn't go and visit. I was, busy, and it sounds cold and callous to say that, but I sort of always send my representative, or if we're having a dinner, like everyone knows I'm not cooking for you, but I can Uber Eats a meal for you. Like I think it's always just about making sure that if it's taken care of, even if I'm not the one who's done it, then it somehow alleviates a little bit of that guilt.
I wonder, Esther, like in particularly in dementia, like my mom has an early Alzheimer's diagnosis, and like how she's interprets no even is like she may not hear it in the same way that she normally would. I don't know if there's literature on that, but since you mentioned that specifically.
I don't know. Can you say a little more? So what do you
Oh,
think?
just like I think with the disinhibition that comes with dementia, there may be like an interpretation of like I might be like I can't do this,
Oh,
but it's
yeah.
like oh, but what do you have to do, right? Like like it's the cognitive
Uh,
piece on the other side.
mhm.
Um, I don't know if
Yeah,
there's
I
any
don't
literature on
know. I don't know. I mean, it seems like
that.
that would be more challenging. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know anything about the techniques.
yeah. Any other questions? Did someone unmute?
Yeah, this is a follow-up question for Esther. Actually, I could probably, sorry. You had mentioned, and this is something I see a lot in a lot of my patients with diabetes, is that age group in like the 40s and the 50s. has a lot of probably the most struggle, I think, in terms of self-management for diabetes. And I think it's just because we're busy, like there's a lot of these different competing demands. Are there are there data? I mean, I know that we all miss appointments and things like that, but are there data showing like these like long-term health outcomes um because of all these different competing caregiving demands?
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, there's a lot of research showing that caregivers have worse health outcomes than others. I think it's much more difficult to link it back specifically to, particular caregiving demands or, I mean, it's mostly comparisons of caregivers and non-caregivers. So we see that there are differences. We don't always know why from the literature. But there's more and more work on this. I think people have recognized that this is a very real thing. And is it missed appointments? Is it the actual physical toll of caregiving? Is it sleep? I think those are still questions. Like, what are the mechanisms?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from our panelists? And anything our panelists would like to say as we close out? Anything you missed in your Q&A? Lots of thank yous coming in here. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking your time to be with us. I've tried to take notes on some of the resources and tips and tricks that you all mentioned. Esther mentioned this before, like sometimes our institutions have supports that we don't even know about. Sapna, in going through this, identified this Bright Horizons. Is that okay if I share that,
Oh
Sapna?
yeah, of course. So Sanofi has a benefit for us, the company I work for called Bright Horizons, and they have a link with some resources that are available to employees in terms of caregiving help and all. So I think larger corporations may actually be doing this,
Yeah,
as Zarina mentioned.
yeah, so it's really great because like we may have these resources but not even know to look for them. So that was a really good one. And it seems like it's publicly available. So hopefully that can be another place for those of you who are looking for resources on the topic. Um, Thank you all, and I will definitely share what we have on our website. And if you think of any other resources, I'm just going to put my email in the chat um, that you didn't hear come up today, but you think would be useful for anyone. Please do send me an email and we'll try to generate a list. Thank you.